Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. All right, the Green Bay Packers have made a selection at number 52 overall. They take South Carolina cornerback Brandon Cisse, formerly of North Carolina State, transferred to South Carolina, a Gamecock as he wrapped up his collegiate career. So we see general manager Brian Gutekunst and company stand pat at 52. They didn't move up. They didn't move back. They take the cornerback out of South Carolina, who a lot of people entering the draft said, hey, if he's on the board at 52 for Green Bay, it's on par. It's an on-brand Packer pick. Why is that? Well, first, we know Goody has said in years past on a couple of occasions they do not use the RAS model, but typically when Green Bay makes draft picks, it's a lot of freakish athletic prospects who score very high on the RAS model. Cisse, a 9.24 out of 10 for his RAS score. You're talking about a guy with good length at nearly 6 foot, 5'11 and 3/4, I think was the measurement. A good frame, super fast, 4.41 40-yard dash time, which is pretty good. Maybe I shouldn't say super fast, but good speed, especially vertically. Couple of things that, maybe dinged him and prevented him from being a first-round pick or maybe going earlier in the second round. You're talking about a guy who, when you read these draft profiles and what analysts and the experts are saying, it's a cornerback who, will press cover. He'll get in your face. He's physical. He invites that sort of play. But on some underneath routes, he can get lost. Trying to diagnose what's going on in front of him, reading what the quarterback's going to do. The read-react maybe isn't necessarily where you want it to be. I did read one quote from a scout in the AFC, a national scout, who said, and I quote, about Brandon Cisse, who the Packers drafted, cornerback out of South Carolina, number 52 overall, and I quote, "You draft him more for tomorrow's tools and not for today's tape. The bad reps are going to get corrected. I like his makeup and his speed." Very on brand for the Packers at a cornerback pick. A guy who's got good speed, especially vertically, a good frame, a high RAS score. And when you read bullet points about him on his draft profile, almost the first one on every single write-up about Brandon Cisse says explosive athletic ability, really good athlete, great athletic traits. It talks about him as an athletic specimen, first and foremost. Are there some things that are going to have to get fine-tuned? Of course. He was a second-round pick. Even first-round picks, are not a finished product. Far from it in a lot of instances. But Green Bay gets a cornerback. I think most Packer fans are going to be happy with that. One thing that's very interesting is we always hear Goody say that Green Bay, it's best available on the board, best available on the board. They never want to be an organization or a team that goes with needs. Like, oh my gosh, we're panicking, we need a quarterback. Oh my gosh, we need a wide receiver, a tight end, whatever the position might be, and then draft based off that philosophy. Yet I do think it's telling that at times we have seen Green Bay, and with this pick of Brandon Cisse, like was there another position group entering this draft that you had circled as like Green Bay's top priority? I think almost everyone said it's cornerback. Cornerback is the number one need. It's the number one priority. I do think there are times where Goody can, in the rest of the brain trust, can sort of blend those ideas together and say, hey, we really could use a cornerback. We don't have a first-round pick this year. Our first selection slated to be at number 52. Now, hey, we stood firm. We're at 52. We're on the clock. We like this guy, Brandon Cisse. It also fits a need. He maybe, and we won't know, but was he the best available player on Green Bay's board? Who knows? But was he in that range where it was like, hey, we can take him. He's one of the best available on our board, but also fits our primary need, and you can kind of glue those ideas together. I do like to think that there are times where Green Bay operates under the premise of we really need a cornerback to add to this room. He's one of the best available we have on the board. Let's go for it. And so that's what Green Bay did. One thing that was increasingly fascinating, and as I'm recording this, and obviously as you watch it, the name will probably come off the board by then. I'm just refreshing. Yeah, the cornerback out of Tennessee, McCoy. And he was projected by many to be a top 20 pick. Almost every single mock draft had him as a first rounder. And he didn't play last year because of a torn ACL. And recent medicals that came to light within the last week and the lead up to the draft showed that, hey, he's probably going to need another operation on his knee. Timetable for this year now, it's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of fogginess. We just don't know. Yet this was supposed to be someone who was a no-doubt first-round pick and in the minds of most, a top 20 selection. And when Green Bay was up at 52, and again, I'm just refreshing, we're on pick 63 now, and McCoy is still on the board, the cornerback from Tennessee. And it was hard to not think of Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan last year, who was undoubtedly across the board, unanimous name that was going to be picked in the first round. Medicals come up before the draft. Teams get scared away. Teams look elsewhere. He ends up going, I think it was 47th overall in the second round. He was even a higher selection than McCoy. People looked at Will Johnson and said, this is probably number one corner. You're talking about a guy who go top 10. A lot of people said top 12, top 15 at worst, in that range, and he fell all the way to 47. We're now seeing it with McCoy. Oh, it was a recent selection made. He has not been picked yet, and we're on the at the time of recording this, Seattle's on the clock with the last pick of round 2, and McCoy's still there. So when Green Bay was up, I sat back and I thought, man, this is who many people deemed the Tennessee cornerback, Jermod McCoy, as the top cornerback in this class. But then you're worried because torn ACL, suffered last January, cost him last season, or the January before, I should say, and January 2025 he tore his ACL. And now recent medicals are showing, hey, he probably needs his knee operated on again. And so you're wondering, well, is he even going to play this year now? Could this guy sit out 2 years of football? And that's a massive red flag for a lot of teams. But my thought was, what does Green Bay think about the medicals? Do the Packers believe that maybe he needs another operation on the knee, but all will go well, he'll be fine back on the field at some point this year? And long-term, more importantly, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, would Green Bay have an idea that, this shouldn't be something that hampers him long-term? Sure, it stinks that he might need another operation on his knee, but checks a lot of boxes for us. A lot of people had him as the top cornerback in this draft class. Here he is at 52 because of some red flags popping up on medicals. And so I thought, if Green Bay goes corner, do they go McCoy here? Just because this was a guy who, again, unanimously was going to be a first-round pick. Now he's available, almost falls into your lap in the middle of round 2. But Green Bay goes with a very on-brand, on-par Green Bay-type prospect in Brandon Cisse. Again, 5'11" in 3/4, 190 pounds, 4.41 40-yard dash. And every single draft profile you read says the first thing that they mention is his athletic build. Like his top trait is that he's just a really damn good athlete. And I'm just reading NFL.com's write-up. In the overview, the first sentence literally says, and I quote, "Teams will be willing to take a chance on Cisse's explosive athleticism and upside, but a refinement runway might be needed to smooth some of the rougher edges. He's scheme versatile in coverage and is an A-rated run supporter." That's also huge. Green Bay loves taking cornerbacks who are at least willing to help out in the run game when it's called upon. Work ethic and athletic testing will work in his favor. However, a lack of instincts and break anticipation could cost him in coverage against quality route runners. His press will become a more effective weapon with technical work, and his route recognition should improve with more reps. Cisse's traits, athleticism, and competitiveness are clear selling points. I mean, it's as if the Packers wrote that review up themselves about Cisse. And so when you were kind of combing over, they could use a cornerback. Which cornerbacks are supposed to be, available around the time Green Bay picks, but should be going in the second round? Cisse was one that you just kept circling back to, where it's like he could go earlier. He could go maybe 40, 41, like somewhere in that range. I'm not saying specifically with who picked at 40, but Cisse maybe goes first round. I know Todd McShay was really, really high on him. In one of his last videos he did leading into the draft, he was going over some names, and Todd McShay said he went back, watched, I think he said 3 extra games worth of tape just on Brandon Cisse, and McShay came away from that saying he might be the best cornerback in this class. And he brought up the name McCoy. He brought up the name Avion Terrell out of Clemson and some of those other corners, Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. And he said he came away from that thinking this guy's a player, and he might end up being the best cornerback in this draft class. Again, we don't know. I can't sit here and tell you Brandon Cisse is going to be a number 1 corner and starting for the Packers for the next, 7 to 9 years. We just don't know. What we do know is why Green Bay took him, and he checks just about every damn box that you typically see the Packers take when they target these athletic marvels. It doesn't matter the position. They took Lucas Van Ness because he's a freakish athlete at Iowa. He didn't start a single game for the Hawkeyes, and the Packers took him in the first round. They draft offensive linemen because they're athletes and they're versatile. Jordan Morgan plays guard, plays tackle. Anthony Belton, big frame, right? Tackle at North Carolina State. You plug him in at right guard last year, and he starts a few games there. We just see it across the board. Edgerrin Cooper, a second-round pick a couple years ago out of A&M. Go back and read Edgerrin Cooper's draft profiles and what the write-ups and the videos were all saying about him. The top thing was this guy is an athletic freak. And that's what Green Bay did. They took a guy who scored a 9.24 RAS score, an athletic cornerback in Brandon Cisse, and now they hope that they can mold that together into being a future number one cornerback. The last thing I'll say is we'll get out of here. Day one impact, we just don't know. I'd love to have an answer for you. I would just say TBD. I need to see how training camp looks, how he looks in the preseason. But one good thing is Green Bay, they went with a need that potentially could have also been a top player on the board for them at the time when they selected at number 52. And I think there's a lot of Packer fans, and this is not a knock on Keyshawn Nixon or Carrington Valentine or Benjamin St-Juste or anyone in that cornerback room, but it clearly needed reinforcements. It clearly needed help, a jolt of energy, and you hope Brandon Cisse can provide that right out of the gate. So that's where the Packers go. Cornerback out of South Carolina, Brandon Cisse at number 52 overall. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciative of all the support. We'll see you next time.